The morning after Master Hobbs' burial does not arrive in grey. Instead, the sky breaks open in a display of majestic colour that seems almost too grand for a quiet village. As you step from your cottage, you find the horizon stained with a deep, bruised plum that softens into a shimmering rose. Above that, a thin ribbon of liquid gold stretches across the world, catching the undersides of the clouds. The air is crisp, carried by a gentle cold wind that doesn't bite, but rather wakes the skin. It is a traveller's wind, steady and predictable. You stand by your well, watching the colours change as the sun climbs higher. The white snow from yesterday is still there, but under this light, it reflects the sky, turning the churchyard into a sea of pale lavender and peach. You feel a profound sense of calm. The heavy labour of the burial is behind you, and the village feels settled. Today is not for digging. Today is for the stones. You gather your bucket of lime, your trowel, and a small hammer. You head toward the southern boundary wall, where the frost and time have conspired to loosen a few of the ancient flints. In the Middle Ages, the churchyard wall was more than a physical barrier. It was a legal and spiritual boundary. Known as the Cura Animarum, the wall separated the consecrated ground, the garden of the dead, from the secular world outside. Maintaining this wall was often the responsibility of the entire parish, though the physical labour frequently fell to the sexton or the gravedigger. You reach the wall. It is a dry wall in parts, held together by gravity and the careful placement of stones. But the sections near the gate are reinforced with lime mortar. You spend the morning in a slow, satisfying rhythm. You scrape away the old, crumbly mortar, the sound a dry scritch-scritch that the wind carries away. You mix a new batch of lime. It is thick and white, smelling faintly of minerals and heat. You apply it with your trowel, sliding the cold paste into the gaps before pressing a flint into place. Press, wiggle, set. It is a quiet puzzle. You aren't just repairing a wall, you are knitting the past back together. As you work, the sky shifts again. The rose and gold fade into a high, brilliant azure, a blue so deep it feels like looking into the heart of a sapphire. There isn't a single bird in the sky, just the vastness of the winter light. You find a small fossil in one of the flints, a coiled shell from an ocean that hasn't existed for 1,000,000 years. You trace the spiral with your thumb before burying it back into the mortar. It is a secret kept by the wall. Movement at the edge of the woods catches your eye. You go still, your trowel mid-air. Out of the dark trunks of the oaks, a fox emerges. He's a magnificent streak of copper against the white snow. He moves with a liquid grace, his paws making no sound on the frozen crust. He is on the hunt, his nose twitching, his ears swiveling to catch the subterranean rustle of a vole beneath the drifts. He stops and looks at you. For a heartbeat, the two hunters of the parish, one of life, one of the earth, share a look. His eyes are amber, mirroring the sky's earlier light. He doesn't fear you. Perhaps he recognizes a fellow creature of the quiet. Then, with a flick of his white-tipped tail, he pounces. He disappears head first into a drift, emerges with his prize, and vanishes back into the shadows of the woods. The fox was a recurring character in medieval folklore, often portrayed as Reynard, the clever trickster. While farmers viewed them as pests, they were often respected by those who lived on the margins of the village, the woodsmen and gravediggers, for their ability to survive in the leanest months of winter. In the afternoon, you receive visitors. Two pilgrims bound for the shrine in the next county stop at the lich gate. They are weary, their cloaks stained with the travel of a dozen miles. They don't ask for much, just the name of the church and a place to sit out of the wind. You share a bit of your bread with them. You talk of the weather and the white road ahead. They look at the churchyard with a distant, respectful awe. To them, this is just a stop on a journey. To you, it is the destination of every journey. They thank you with a nod and continue on, their figures shrinking as they move down the long white valley. As the sun begins to dip, the sky performs its final act. The azure turns to a vibrant violet, then a deep, electric indigo. The clouds on the horizon look like distant, burning mountains. You pack your tools. The wall is solid again. The stones are set. You return to your cottage, the gentle cold wind at your back. You light your fire and watch the orange light dance against the stone walls. You open your ledger and write with a contented hand. A day of majestic light. The sky was a cathedral of colour. Repaired the south wall with lime and flint, saw the copper hunter in the snow. Two pilgrims passed through, gave them bread. The stones are firm, the world is quiet. You lean back, the fire is warm. The day's work is visible in the strength of the wall you left behind. Close your eyes. The colours have faded to black and silver. The fox is in his den. The wall is standing guard. Sleep now. The morning arrives with a sky the colour of a well-worn silver coin. Flat, steady, and without the dramatics of yesterday's fire. The gentle, cold wind has died down to a mere breath, leaving the world in a state of suspended animation. You find Father Thomas already out in the yard, his hands tucked deep into his sleeves, staring at the great yew. His face is a map of wrinkles, each one holding the story of a winter past. You approach him, the crunch of your boots the only intrusion on the silence. You don't speak at first. In the parish, silence is a shared language. Finally, he looks at you and gestures toward the horizon where the clouds hang low and heavy. "The wool is thick this year," he says softly. "The wood storage must be checked. We may be digging in the iron frost by the moon's turn." You spend a long hour talking with him, not of theology or the state of souls, but of the practicalities of death in a long winter. You discuss the tallow stores for the chapel lamps and the seasoned oak planks set aside for the sudden sleepers. There is a deep, quiet comfort in this planning. Two men, one of the spirit and one of the spade, ensuring that the village remains anchored. As he leaves, he places a hand on your shoulder. "You stay the course, my son," he says. "The living forget, but the ground remembers your care." Medieval parish life was a complex web of preparation. The winter store wasn't just for food, it was for the logistics of mortality. In particularly harsh winters, the ground could freeze so deep that corpse houses or temporary stone vaults were used to hold the dead until the spring thaw allowed the gravedigger to break the earth once more. When the father returns to his prayers, you turn to the pathways. The snow from Hobb's burial has packed down, and a thin skin of ice has begun to form. For the living to visit the dead, they must have a way through. You take your wide wooden shovel, the one with the edge charred hard by fire to resist the rot. Scrape, scuff, slide. The sound is a steady heartbeat. You clear the path from the lich gate to the chapel door, then the winding trail to the south wall. Your breath comes in rhythmic puffs of white, matching the movement of your arms. It is honest work. It doesn't require the soul-searching of a burial, only the steady application of strength. As you clear the area near the old sundial, your shovel catches on something caught in the frozen mud beneath the snow. You kneel, using your trowel to gently pry it free. It is a pilgrim's token, a small lead badge cast in the shape of a scallop shell. It is grey and humble, but it gleams in the flat light. You imagine a traveller centuries ago losing it here while resting their weary bones. To you, it is a treasure, a sign that even when we think we are walking alone, we are treading paths worn smooth by 1,000 others. You slip it into your inner pocket, right against your heart. As the afternoon light begins to thin, a woman named Ilara approaches from the village. She is the tanner's daughter, known for her sharp mind and her quiet ways. She doesn't approach with the usual wary look the villagers give the man of the graves. She walks straight to where you are leaning on your shovel. "You've been in the cold since the bell rang for Hob," she says, her voice as steady as the winter sky. She holds out a cloth-wrapped bowl and a small flask. "My father says a man who minds the wall shouldn't have to mind a cold hearth as well." You take the gift, your fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. Her hands are warm, smelling of pine and fat. There is an interest in her eyes, not the pity people give the lonely, but a genuine curiosity for the man who stands at the threshold. You thank her, your voice a bit raspy from the day's silence. She nods, a small knowing smile touching her lips, and walks back toward the village smoke. You watch her go, feeling a warmth that has nothing to do with the sheepskin on your back. In small medieval communities, the gravedigger or sexton occupied a unique social niche. While often ritually unclean in some cultures, in many English parishes, he was a respected civil servant. Domestic gestures such as gifting food, alms gifts, were common ways for the community to integrate these liminal figures into the social fabric without requiring them to leave their necessary solitude. The evening settles in with a deep, silent chill. You return to your cottage and set Ilara's gift upon the table. You uncover the bowl to find a rich, dark pottage of beef, barley and leeks, thick enough to stand a spoon in. The flask contains a heavy, spiced cider that tastes of the sun-drenched apples of last autumn. You light your fire, the dry wood catching instantly and filling the room with a flickering orange life. You eat slowly, savouring the salt and the spice, feeling your strength return to your limbs. The pilgrim's token sits on the table beside your bowl, a leaden companion in the firelight. You open your ledger. The ink flows easily tonight. You write, "Cleared the paths for the living today. Spoke with the father of the iron frost to come. Found a traveller's shell near the dial. A good omen. Ilara brought the pottage. It was warm and held the scent of the village. I am staying the course. The wall is strong. The dead are deep. I am at peace." You lean back, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling. The world outside is a vast, cold silence, but here, by the hearth, there is a small, bright pocket of life. You touch the leaden shell one last time before the sleep claims you. Close your eyes. The paths are clear. The fire is a steady glow. The pottage was warm. The village is dreaming. Rest now. The day begins not with light, but with a sound, a low, visceral thrumming that seems to vibrate through the very stones of your cottage. You don't need to look outside to know that the great gale has arrived. This is the wind the sailors fear, the one that travels across the flat plains of the sea to break itself against the hills of your parish. You dress in layers of heavy, grease-treated wool, pulling a leather gambesons over your tunic to break the wind's bite. As you step outside, the air is a chaotic swirl of slate-grey clouds and stinging sleet. The world has lost its colours again. It is a study in shadow and motion. You look toward the churchyard. The great yew, usually so stoic, is thrashing its limbs like a frantic giant. Your first thought is for the chapel. The lead on the roof is ancient, and a wind like this has a way of finding the smallest gap, peeling back the metal like a skin. You fight your way across the yard, leaning your weight into the gale. Every step is a negotiation with the earth. You reach the chapel door, the oak heavy and cold, and slip inside. The interior is a cavern of groans and whistles as the wind searches for entry. You see it immediately, a dark stain spreading across the floor near the altar. The rain is find its way through the high, clear story. In the medieval period, the parish church was often the only stone building in the village. During severe storms, it served as a literal sanctuary. It wasn't uncommon for the entire village and their most valuable livestock to shelter within the nave while the wind tore the thatch from their humbler cottages. The gravedigger, as the keeper of the keys, was the first line of defense against the elements. You realize with a jolt of cold fear that you left your ledger on the table in your cottage. To the village, it is a book of names. To you, it is the only proof that the thousands beneath the soil ever drew breath. If the thatch on your roof gives way, the ink will run, and the history of 5 generations will wash away into the mud. You plunge back into the storm. The wind is a physical wall. You see a branch from the great oak snap with a sound like a hunter's bow, tumbling across the mounds you so carefully levelled. You reach your cottage just as a gust lifts the corner of the thatch. The rain begins to drip onto the table, a rhythmic tap, 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 only inches from the parchment. You snatch the ledger, wrapping it in a dry deer hide. You tuck it beneath your gambeson, tight against your chest. The warmth of your body will keep the parchment dry. You look around your small home. It is a frail thing compared to the stone of the church. You gather your few treasures, the iron key, the pilgrim's shell, and the small wooden bird, and place them in a heavy iron pot, burying it deep in the cold ashes of the hearth. If the house falls, the earth will protect what is hers. As you step back toward the door, the wind hits the cottage with a renewed, savage weight. It isn't just a sound anymore. It's a pressure that makes the mud-chinked walls shudder. A sudden, sharp crack echoes from above. A heavy branch from the elderberry tree has snapped, dragging a section of your thatch with it as it falls. Rain begins to pour through the new gap, not in drops, but in a cold, steady stream that splashes against the dirt floor. You move with practiced haste, dragging your heavy oak chest beneath the leak to catch the worst of it. The water is freezing, smelling of the sky and wet rot. You spend the next hour fighting the house itself, using spare lengths of coarse hemp rope to lash the remaining window shutter, which is beating against the stone like a trapped bird. Your fingers go numb, slick with a mixture of grit and icy rainwater, but you do not stop until the cottage is as secure as a sinking ship. By the time the light begins to fail, the rain tapers off into a fine, needle-like mist, but the sky remains a bruised, chaotic swirl. The soaker has ended, yet the wind has only grown more articulate. It doesn't roar now, it howls. A high, thin shriek that finds every crack in the timber and plays them like the pipes of a grim organ. You return to the hearth. The iron pot remains safely buried in the ashes, a silent anchor for your treasures. With trembling hands, you begin to rebuild the fire. You use the driest heartwood you have, shavings of cedar that you've kept tucked in the driest corner of the room. You strike the flint. Spark. Each tiny orange star dies in the damp air until finally one catches. As the flames grow, licking hungrily at the wood, the shadows in the cottage begin to retreat. You peel off your sodden gambeson, feeling the ledger, still dry, still warm from your skin, against your chest. You set it on the table, far from the reach of any stray drips from the ceiling. You wrap yourself in a dry, albeit scratchy wool blanket, and sit on your stool, pulling it so close to the fire that the heat stings your shins. In the medieval world, the hearth was the literal heart of the home, legally defined as the focal point of a dwelling. A gravedigger's cottage was often built with a sunken hearth, which allowed the heat to radiate through the earth floor long after the flames died. A crucial architectural survival trait during the volatile storms of the Little Ice Age. You sit there, listening to the howl outside. It is a lonely sound, the sound of a world that doesn't care for the living or the dead. But inside, the fire is steady. You reach out and touch the spine of the ledger. It is safe. You are safe. The storm may have taken a piece of your roof, but it could not take the names. The warmth begins to sink into your bones, replacing the icy ache of the rain. Your eyes grow heavy as you watch the embers pulse. The howl of the wind becomes a distant, fading memory, a background noise to the rhythmic crackle of the wood. Close your eyes. The water has stopped falling. The fire is your shield. The names are dry. Rest now, keeper. The snow does not fall today. It descends. It is not the light, dancing flurry of early December, but a thick, relentless curtain of white that turns the air into something you can almost chew. You open your door and find a wall of drift nearly to your waist. The world has been erased. The forest, the village path, the low stone walls, all have been smoothed into a single rolling sea of white. It is a stopping snow, the kind that freezes the gears of the world and tells man that, for now, he is not in charge. You reach for your shovel. Even on a day when the world stops, the paths to the essential places must remain open. You begin with the trail to the well and the small, narrow vein that leads to the chapel. The snow is heavy, wet-bottomed and packed. With every toss of your spade, you feel the pull in your shoulders, a slow, hot burn that is the only thing keeping you warm in the biting air. High above, in the skeletal reaches of the great yew, the crows are gathered. They do not fly. They sit like ink blots against the white, their feathers puffed out until they look like rounded stones. When they speak, it is a short, dry rattle, a cosign to the cold. They know what this weather brings. They watch you work, their black eyes reflecting the blankness of the sky, waiting for the world to reveal its next secret. In the Little Ice Age of the late medieval period, winters were often brutal enough to isolate villages for weeks. The gravedigger's role shifted from excavation to pathfinding. Keeping the church path clear was a ritual act of defiance against the season, ensuring that the community remained connected to its spiritual center, even when the roads to the outside world were lost. As the afternoon light turns a strange, ghostly violet, a sound carries over the hills. It is long, rising in pitch until it breaks into a series of sharp yaps. The wolves. They are far off, perhaps in the high crags of the North Woods, but in this frozen silence they sound as if they are standing just beyond the churchyard wall. It is a lonely sound, a reminder that the wild is always waiting at the edge of the firelight. But then a different sound cuts through the chill. From the lee of the high hill behind the village, you hear the high, bright peals of children's laughter. They are sliding down the slopes on greased hides and old barrel staves. To them, the snow is not a barrier. It is a gift. You stop your shoveling and lean on your spade, watching the small dark shapes tumble through the drifts. The contrast is sharp, the wolves mourning the hunger of winter and the children celebrating its wonder. You realize that you stand exactly in the middle, the one who guards the end so that the beginning can play in peace. The cold eventually becomes too sharp to ignore. You retreat to your cottage, the interior now a sanctuary of golden shadow. You spend the long afternoon by the hearth, the table pulled close to the heat. It is time to prepare for the new year. You open the great ledger, its pages smelling of old parchment, and the faint, sweet scent of the beeswax you use to seal the covers. You spend hours reviewing the entries. You trace the names of those you laid to rest this year. Bridge, Master Hob, the nameless traveller. You are closing the books on their lives, ensuring that every date is correct and every location is marked. You prepare the fresh pages for the year to come, ruling the lines with a straight edge and a piece of lead. It is a quiet, meditative task. You are the architect of the village's memory, laying the foundation for stories that haven't even begun yet. As night settles in, the wind begins to rattle the window shutter, but it cannot reach you. You have a small pot of mead heating on the hob, a gift from the abbey. It is thick, fermented from the summer's heather honey, and as it warms, the room fills with the scent of flowers and sunshine. You pour a cup, the liquid a deep, glowing amber. You sit back in your chair, the warm cup between your hands. The fire is a steady, rhythmic pulse in the room. You think of the crows in the yew, the wolves on the hill, and the children in the drifts. The world is harsh, yes, but it is also full. You have done your work. The paths are clear enough. The names are written. The year is turning, and you are here to see it through. The mead is sweet. The fire is low. The ledger is ready for the first name of the spring. The white world is sleeping outside your door. And now, so can you. Close your eyes. Listen to the snow brushing against the thatch. The crows have tucked their heads beneath their wings. The wolves have fallen silent. Rest now. The final morning of the year arrives with a sunrise that defies the cold. The blank, white sky of the storm has vanished, replaced by a horizon so vibrant it looks like a cask of blackberry wine has been spilled across the east. The deep purples and jagged streaks of crimson reflect off the heavy snow, turning the churchyard into a landscape of fire and ice. You stand on your doorstep, the air so cold it makes the hairs in your nose crackle, but you cannot look away. It is a king's morning, a rare, majestic bridge between the old year and the new. You see a movement near the lich gate. It is Ilara, the tanner's daughter. She is wearing a cloak of deep forest green, her breath trailing behind her like a silken ribbon. She isn't carrying a bowl today. She's simply standing, watching the light. When she sees you, she doesn't wave. That would be too loud for a morning like this. She simply inclines her head, a slow, deliberate acknowledgement. You walk toward her, your boots crunching with a sound like breaking glass. I wondered if the snow had swallowed your cottage whole, she says as you reach her. There is a playful spark in her eyes, a warmth that seems to push back the winter. The earth and I have an understanding, you reply, your voice sounding deep and resonant in the still air. It doesn't take me until I'm ready. She laughs, a sound as clear as a bell. My father is at the church, preparing the vats for the New Year's feast. He sent me to ask if the keeper of the names would join the vigil tonight. He says a year shouldn't be allowed to slip away without a witness. You feel a strange pull, a connection that goes beyond the simple exchange of pottage. You agree. For the first time in many years, you will not spend the turn of the year alone with your ledger. Before the sun reaches its zenith, you walk with Ilara toward the village. As you approach her father's workshop, the smells of the churchyard, damp earth and cold stone, are replaced by the rich, pungent aromas of the tannery, oak bark, salt, and cured leather. It is a smell of industry, of things being preserved and made strong. Inside, the heat is intense. Great vats of tanbark liquor simmer, and the air is thick with steam. Ilara's father, a man with arms like gnarled oak roots, shakes your hand. His grip is stained dark by the tannins, just as yours is stained by the soil. 2 men of the deep work, he rumbles, offering you a stool by the fire. You spend the afternoon in their company, watching Ilara work a piece of fine calfskin with a bone tool. She moves with the same focus you bring to a graveside, a steady, quiet competence. You realize that while you guard what is finished, they prepare what is to come. The connection feels solid, like a well-set stone. In medieval social hierarchies, the unclean trades, tanners, smiths, and gravediggers, often formed tight-knit social bonds. Their work involved the raw elements of nature, hide, fire, and earth. Because they were often relegated to the edges of the village due to the smells or superstitions associated with their work, they created their own internal community of respect and mutual aid. As darkness falls, the village gathers at the church. This is the watch night. The interior of the chapel is transformed. Hundreds of small beeswax candles have been lit, their flames dancing in the draught, turning the stone walls into a golden, breathing thing. You sit in the back, Ilara beside you. The scent of her, pine and cured leather, mixes with the church's incense and damp stone. Father Thomas stands before the altar. He doesn't preach. Tonight is for the names. He begins to read from the parish register, the same names you have written in your ledger. As he speaks them, the villagers murmur a soft, "God rest." When he reaches the name of Master Hob, the sound is a heavy, collective sigh. You feel the weight of the book against your chest, the physical record of the year's toll. You realize that your solitary work in the mud and snow is what gives this ceremony its foundation. You are the one who provided the bed for every name the Father speaks. Then comes the silence. The candles are blown out, one by one, until only a single light remains at the altar. The church is plunged into a darkness so thick you can feel the breath of the person next to you. Ilara's hand finds yours in the dark. Her skin is warm and rough, a living anchor in the shadow. You hold it firmly. Clang. The first stroke of the midnight bell hits. The bronze heart of the tower shakes the floor beneath your feet. 2, 3. With every strike, The old year is pushed further into the past. At the 12th stroke, the father relights the great candle. The year is born, he whispers. You walk out of the church into the biting night air. The stars are so bright they look like holes poked in the floor of heaven. You walk Elara to her door. Tomorrow the sun rises on a new ledger, she says softly. She leans in and brushes her cheek against yours, a gesture of immense tenderness. Make sure you leave room for some life in it this year, keeper. You return to your cottage. Your fire has burned down to a single, pulsing ember. You sit in your chair and look at the blank first page of the New Year's ledger. You don't pick up the pen. Not yet. You simply sit, feeling the warmth of the fire on your face and the memory of Elara's hand in yours. The year has turned. The names are safe. The sunrise is coming. And for the first time, the threshold doesn't feel quite so lonely. Close your eyes. The bell has fallen silent. The snow is glowing under the stars. Rest now.